What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Split Screen D&D, the show where we are attacking all things Dungeons & Dragons from both sides of the screen. As always, my name's Tom Quinn, resident Dungeon Master here at Modern Myth.
And I'm Josh Winans, resident player character here at Modern Myth.
Kick us off, brother.
All right.
I think,
Well, before we get going right into today's topic, first off, hey, we're a new channel. We've been slowly growing, and to those of you who've already subscribed and are viewing, thank you guys so much. It means the world to us. But we are a small channel. Every subscribe matters, and every upvote, every thumbs up
yeah,
makes a huge difference. So please, hey, if you find any enjoyment in this, help us grow. You know, hey, if you know, maybe share it with your table of your Dungeons and Dragons friends, and just spread the love and get that sweet Modern Myth all over everyone.
There we go. Yeah, if you guys are finding enjoyment here, jump on down, hit that like, hit that comment, hit that subscribe, and lock in that little bell so you don't miss any future content. If you're catching us by podcast, we hugely appreciate that you're listening, and we would love a follow, throw a rating on.
Please
on
throw a rating.
So we would love to hear from you guys.
All right, enough of that. So today, I would love to talk to you about. Okay, so D&D as a player, I am the hero. I am the guy that's smiting evil. I'm saving lives. I'm making that money. But all of that can seem rather meh if you don't have that thing you're fighting against. That maybe it's the BBEG. Maybe it's something else. But having that villain there really brings depth and purpose to a player's life in D&D. So I think really delving in what makes a good villain would be a wonderful topic for today.
I love it. I think it's actually, I'm surprised that we haven't done villains yet.
Yeah.
Because they really are the crux of the entire reason you're doing anything in Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
If there aren't villains motivated to do villainous things,
right?
Well, so long as you are a hero, you don't got a whole lot to do with your time at the table.
Yeah, I guess that's. Well, I guess we could talk about evil tables. You know, hey, are the villains good guys?
Certainly,
but you know, but yeah, if you're just running around killing rats, there's only so many rats and so many cellars before you're like, this is a fun game. Yay!
Right. So where do we want to start? Do we want to start on the DM side? We want to start on the player side?
It might be good to flesh out what kind of villains what they are, and I think to do that start on the DM side would be helpful.
Okay. Well, I think to a greater or lesser extent, on DM and the PM on the motivation episode,
check it out, by the way.
Check it out. I kind of went over. I mean, this is certainly the way that I think about, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a villain. I think a villain is a special class of antagonist in the story. If you are wanting to go speak with the king, and there are two guards who are stopping you from doing that, they're acting in an antagonistic manner.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily villains.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That said, I really do think that the crux of what is going to set up a villain is that their motivations are fundamentally misaligned with the party's motivations.
Ooh.
I think often that results in, if you're talking about a good party, kind of your classic.
Yeah, let's just stick with that
trope,
for now.
That generally means that your villain is acting in some evil fashion. But I do like to, I think I prefer to box that into the thought process of a villain is an entity in the world whose motivations are misaligned with the parties, because I do think there's plenty of room for great villains who are not inherently evil.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, actually, the way you say that, it's the king's right-hand man who's whispering in his ear. Maybe he's not whispering him, hey, you need to sell all these people's souls to the devil. Maybe he's whispering, hey, you need to give money to X faction when you are in alliance with Y faction. So now you guys are opposite each other, even though, hey, it might not be the end of the world. It might not be he's selling souls to demons or anything, but you're right. It's misaligned, but that is still, in that moment, your villain.
Yeah, and I think, too, as a DM, our goal with antagonists, with any antagonists that we want to take to the next level, is we need to elevate them to villainhood. A villain is a character in the world that the party is going to identify, remember, and most importantly, want to bring to justice or want to kill or want to, because I think that, again, there are many ways that players, or I should say characters, can interact with the party in antagonistic ways. But that does not inherently put them in a place where the party is going, oh, I cannot wait until I get that, that son of a gun. He's, that I think is the emotion that we want our villains to draw out, amongst many others. But I think villainhood should evoke some emotional response from the party.
Whether it's hatred or like disgust or could you say sympathy?
Oh, I absolutely think, I certainly think for the party to come to sympathize with a villain, more context is required, because they can act in a way that seems quite villainous, or maybe even is objectively villainous. But when the party comes to realize that their actual motivations are maybe at the 30,000 foot view, they come to find like, okay, maybe they're not going about it the way that we agree with. That's where our motivations are misaligned, but their end goal actually isn't that different from ours. So there's all sorts of, like I said, there's room for very complex villain relationships and very simple ones. Sometimes you have a lich who
just needs to die,
and that doesn't mean that he can't be evocative. He can't have all sorts of he can't be drawing the party into a place where they're going like, oh, I cannot wait to, but it's not a question of, is this someone we can come to sympathize with? He's raising an undead army. No, you probably can't come to sympathize with that.
Yeah, well, the Rovers ran into that with Count Dracula. What's his real name?
Lord Felstad is...
So Dracula.
Yeah.
He was, so we are fighting almost exactly kind of that scenario, fighting an army of the undead, and we're trying to find any allies we can. And we ran across a vampire, right? And we had to wrestle with the moral choice. Do we help the vampire out? Because if we help him out, we would get he would say, hey, yeah, I'll totally help with the undead army. But to help him out, we'd have to basically sacrifice someone.
I love that you bring that example up for a couple of reasons. One, because there's a ton of moral gray area there,
which is always fun to explore.
But also because it serves to highlight the motivation factor perfectly. This is a vampire. This is a creature that, generally speaking, when you're talking about a campaign that is littered with undead enemies, is as prime a figure. But in your discussions with this character, expressed to you that he could feel himself beginning to lose, as an undead entity, beginning to lose his agency and lose himself. And this frankly terrified him, to the point that he basically, your motivations in that regard are actually quite similarly aligned. But Felstad really was poised well to serve as an ally or a villain or an enemy. And I think that shows how thin that line can be, and really at your whim. You could say, no, you're a disgusting, foul, evil thing, and now it's time to die. Or you can say, yes, I can sympathize with the fear of losing oneself, despite you being unholy and unnatural.
Right.
And so I think that serves as at least a good marking of that boundary, that for what a villain can be.
Well, I think that's you're just touching on what makes D&D so fun, is the gray area. I think that's what we keep going back to. Whenever you can explore some gray area, maybe not do it all the time.
No,
but it can be a really fun space to explore.
Talk with me a little bit about, because I mean, there's so much that can be said about what we as DMs can inject into villains, and I definitely want to touch more on that.
Yeah, for sure.
But in the spirit of communicating to other DMs out there, what pushes an entity into that sphere in which all of a sudden you're going, I've got your number, buddy?
For me personally, it doesn't take a lot. You just look, but
Well, I think the thing is I think you are someone who goes, you're a monster and you're bad and like it's time for you to die.
Right.
But the level of attachment that act of killing that monster needs to have for them to have ascended to villainhood. Are there certain attributes? There's one that immediately comes to mind, but I want to hear kind of
Well, two that come to mind for Kel. One is Buttercup and one is Shio.
okay.
And both of them, you develop a relationship. It's not a positive relationship, but you have a relationship. And I think
I love that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Once you develop that relationship, then you can go beyond, hey, they're just a monster. Oh, they're just a bad person. So I think, yeah, developing that relationship it really just makes you want to punch the lights out.
I think that in a different way of saying it, but you basically hit mine, and this is something I will harp on for the rest of the episode to some degree or another. Is
that's exciting.
And this goes to this absolutely goes out to DMs if you're struggling to introduce villains into your world that your party is just chomping at the bit to get back to. Time.
Ooh, that's true.
Much as the party themselves, their bonds grow over time as they have these experiences together.
So true.
Think about so many great narratives, whether they be films, novels, video games, your own campaigns. Think how early as an audience you come to meet, and even if the protagonists have not. Now, D&D is special because we're viewing the story through the protagonist's eyes only. It's kind of a first person telling of the story. But in film all the time, you go, we got to see what, in Braveheart, we bounce back and forth to England and go, what exactly is the antagonist? What's the villain doing? And the audience begins building a relationship.
Yep.
Not a positive one, but
it's a relationship.
Needs time for you to see, for you to go, when you see some of the interactions going on between Longshanks and like the conversations he's having about bringing the nobles in Braveheart.
Prima Nocta.
That's
First night.
And I mean that conversation is such an excellent example of how you build villainhood into a character.
And what I love about building up on Braveheart, he seems to one up himself. You're like, man, that is a bad human being. And then next thing you're like, man, that's a bad human being. And he keeps one upping himself, which I totally agree with. And what I loved is like from the very beginning, like you only get a snippet. And I'm reminded of beat 'em ups. Beat 'em ups do this all the time, video games. Double Dragon. You start playing. What's the first freaking scene? Your girlfriend's hanging out. A guy comes up, punches her in the gut, throws him over the shoulder. Yep. Boom, walks off. And then you spend the rest of the game trying to get your girlfriend back from that guy.
Right.
And I mean, every beat 'em up seems to have that story.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard, I think, beat 'em up loop.
Right. Got to rescue the president's daughter. I forget which. That's the Sega Genesis game. I forget which one it is. Or you're the big wrestler guy with the suspenders wearing green. Streets of Rage.
Streets of Rage is what jumps to mind, but
I don't know if that's
honestly,
right.
I'm having a hard time pulling the plot back.
Anyway,
together.
I'm sorry.
But the beauty of that is, again, I mean, like I go to movies like Gladiator. We come to again.
Great villain.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many of them. I don't think you haven't watched Arcane yet, have you?
No.
One,
no spoilers, please.
Highly recommend it. There's a character named Silco in Arcane.
Okay.
Phenomenal villain. Just so smartly written, just really, really, really good.
You might just hit on something too. When you meet a villain that you really want to, there's a part of you that loves them because, and here's the thing is, I think there is a catharsis in feeling completely justified in hating someone. Yep. Like, hey, that person deserves death.
Because the beauty of that, and this is really gets to the heart of, I think, what we want to do at our tables as DMs and what our players just give it to them, is in all of those examples, we as an audience, again, in many cases, long before the protagonists of the story gets to a place where they go where they're going, I'm going to kill that son of a bitch. We as an audience already know they have it coming for the entire, for 20 minutes prior to the protagonist is even knowing the existence of this. In a lot of cases, you find that the setup, again, I go bounce back to Gladiator, the really simple exchange between, and I'm drawing a blank on his name now.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Joaquin Phoenix's character.
Yeah,
Wow.
oh,
No. Drop it in the comments. Drop it in the comments.
Oh, I feel horrible.
Okay, but you know,
Yeah.
when there's a really brief exchange there was some celebration after they've won, and he basically says, I want to go back home to my wife and kids, and he goes, don't get too comfortable.
That's
Rome may
right.
still have, and that little exchange immediately sets a tone. And as an audience, you're going like, you piece of shit.
Yeah, he just wants
like,
to go home. Oh, and then
know?
then of course the next scene he murders his father, which only solidifies he's a
Right,
kind of a
right.
piece of
And
shit.
that's the thing. The protagonist isn't even privy to that.
Mm-mm.
We experience that as an audience. And so we need to keep in mind that as DMs, our players are also the audience. So you need to find ways
Oh, that's so true.
to give them those opportunities. That could be you come into a town and all you're seeing is the aftermath of the villain they've been chasing.
Yeah, like the tree with all the children hanging from it. I mean,
Exactly,
that kind of thing.
So I really think, but all of that hatred, disappointment, disgust, sympathy, whatever you're building into this villain, it's gonna take time. Which means you can't just and not just time and here's a villain, now he's gone. At level 20, you're gonna see him again.
No,
Because
we'll forget about him, quite honestly.
well, yeah, you need opportunities to allow that to build.
It's like a fire, you gotta add wood, you gotta poke it a little bit, you know.
And I will say, I know that this is, I think, probably a pretty contentious topic because there are quite a bit there are quite a few skills, spells, what have you, for expeditious retreats from combat.
Yeah, you got lots of options.
And there are a lot of people who are not a huge fan of enemies kind of getting a free flee from combat. Now, obviously, the players can do things to stop that. There's all sorts of control magic that would stop someone from doing this. Counter spell. There's lots of, but they're pretty niche tools to try and.
Yeah,
I actually would argue that it is far better to allow your players to scrap with someone who is a villain, not just an enemy, but a villain. And albeit there may be the disappointment of, damn it, they got away. And by nature of rules as written, didn't feel like there's a lot we could do about that. It's at least an opportunity to build some more rapport, whatever kind of rapport that is. And so, for instance, you've had a number of skirmishes with Buttercup now.
yeah.
And
I almost kicked his ass several times.
but
Kel has a hate boner for that guy.
The beauty as a DM is that in all of those pillars and all of the ways you can communicate information, those are opportunities for you to communicate more. Again, you meet someone in the village that's just been raised by the enemy, and they tell you their sob story. They don't even know who did this, but you do. There's this weird kind of dramatic irony where the players, this NPC is going like, I don't know why they did this. My boy, he's so young, and they start sobbing, whatever. You immediately are conjuring, the face of the person who did this.
Right.
Rapport is being built where you're going, oh man, I already wanted to kill him, and now I really want to,
Which is a time aspect. But you're talking about, hey, is it a cheap move to let the villain escape?
Well, I think the notion of let them escape is maybe a fine verbiage, but yeah, I mean, I think ultimately there are tools inherently in the game that make, and now they're available to the players as well.
That's the thing. We have them too. And especially at low level, if you don't know, like scrying is a thing. Like especially when you're dealing a high level party, they might be privy to information that the party doesn't know that they're privy to because they don't know all the things that can happen.
Right.
But I think it comes back to that principle we talked about. Like, are you trying to win D&D? Is winning D&D beating the villain.
I completely agree.
But yeah, and I understand the other side is, and it might just be how your table runs, but there is nothing like I want to hate that villain.
Yeah.
I want that relationship with that villain. I want like Buttercup. He kind of there was a chance he got away. It was kind of a like I don't know if I would have like been not a cheap move at all, but he ran away. I was like, that kind of sucked. But at the same time, I was like, sweet, I get to see that mother fricker again, and I'm going to be more powerful. And then it's going to be even better.
Well, and the beauty is I think if you're viewing it through the lens of I'm trying to win, both as a DM or as a then you're never going to find that place where we'll keep Buttercup. Now, for everyone at home who doesn't know, Buttercup,
I'm sorry, listeners at home.
Buttercup is a gift that they have had a number of interactions with, and
I forget his real name. What's his real name? Shivik.
Kel has
Kel and Shivik have a relationship.
Yeah, they've built a little bit of a relationship, and it's been great. It's been some awesome role play in the midst of combat.
It's so much fun.
But the thing that I think players understand about that, or at least should, is that as a DM, we didn't take that character away so that he won, and now he's gone. He's in the wind, and there's maybe there's some adventure hook to finding him again, but ultimately we took him away so that the next time you meet him, you can want it that much more. We took and I say took him away again. Like I said, I do not want to perpetuate the idea that I've gone in and written in, this is where he gets away no matter what the party does.
Right.
But with the tools that he has at his disposal, if the party does not have an answer to them, he's intelligent. He's not going to stay and fight to the death if it's a losing battle.
Which is what makes intelligent creatures so dangerous, which I don't think is explored very often, but that's a whole other topic. Now here's a question, since I'm going to throw this at you. We've been talking about villains.
Yeah.
These are people you want to hate. Let's explore some of the gray area, or maybe even some of the totally opposite. Let's start with gray. So, an enemy that you can relate to. How do you build that so that the party? Do you want the party to question themselves in those instances?
Well, I would harken back to Felstad, and I certainly didn't introduce him in the game inherently as a villain. I wanted him to be kind of on this precipice of the party really does get to decide, is this someone they want to make a villain, or is this someone they want to make an ally? And I think a lot of that comes down to, every party's going to be different, and their moral alignment is going to be different, and their,
we messed that one up. We talked about it recently. We did not do well in that situation.
Well, I mean and that's just one example. I think a good example, I think, is no doubt Thanos is a villain.
Yep. Well, but you can understand where he's coming from.
But I actually think he is a pretty relatable villain.
Yeah.
In fact, I had posed out onto Twitter that if Thanos was in the lottery every time he wanted to wipe out half, I'd have a really hard time faulting his. I mean, clearly he's genocidal. There's that fact.
Well,
so there's no
only
getting around
half.
it.
So it's not truly genocidal.
Well, he's
half-sidal.
Yeah, whatever. But he's he's wanting to kill 50% of the population, but there's such an indiscriminance.
Yeah.
That
it's a true half, not only the blank gets to survive.
Right.
And
the thing, I think that's what makes it a lot. I mean, if he had just said, well, everyone who isn't my people, that's such a classic villain trope. My people will rule the realm, and everyone else will die. It's really easy to go like, nah, and we're gonna kill that guy. So I definitely think that there's gray areas where you're like, you are definitely a villain. You have to be stopped, but I can at least understand your motivations. I think you can push that even further.
Yeah, for sure. And I just to go off that just a tiny bit more, when Thor catches up to Thanos later, when Thanos is just chilling, he's like, "Okay, I did my job. I killed half the people in the universe." He's just hanging out. Thor comes over And Thanos like, I did my job. You do what you need to do, man. I'm good. And Thor just cuts his head off.
Yeah.
Which is almost a heartless thing in that moment. Where in that moment you're like, that was brutal, dude. Like,
Yeah, and I think I actually think that there's in any long form campaign, this harkens back to the contrast element that we've touched on a lot of times. You should have villains that the party has absolutely no question what they need to do when they find them. They need to kill them.
Yep.
They need to, I mean, we're talking about Fury of 1,000 Suns kind of death coming down on them, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where, where the party might go, we can't go through this, guys. Like now that we understand I think to me, one of the really sweet spots is
sweet spot. I like the sweet spot.
and I think it's a difficult one to graft together in a story that you only have a limited amount of control over, but is a villain who has to die. They are going to proceed on whatever path that they're going to proceed down, but the party has no animosity, and in many regards can relate, and that ties in actually to one of what I think is arguably one of the most important qualities for a villain. And this doesn't supersede the space that we're already in, so I don't want to completely leave it.
Gosh, yeah, there's so much we can go down that rabbit hole.
But I think conviction. It doesn't matter if you're talking about an evil lich who is hell-bent on bringing about an era of death, or if you're talking about a guy who is going to assassinate the emperor because his life, his family's life, everything he cares about is hanging in the balance. If he doesn't do this,
yeah,
they all die.
I originally thought of like Anakin, but then I was like, no, that guy's a tool bag. Thank you, George Lucas. Anyway,
but the quality I think that's really important to bestow, part of building rapport with a villain is whatever your villain's motivations are, they have to have conviction.
Yes.
Player characters have all of the leniency in the world to waver on what is good, but a villain needs to know what they're doing, and they are going to do it.
Can I counter that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
So I for the most part, agree. You need that, because again, there's something you want to admire about the villain. Like, even if they're like horrible beyond all recognition, that they're at least, I feel weird saying that because, some villains can be absolutely atrocious and you can't relate to them on any level. But what happens if you come across a villain that could be redeemed?
I think, again, in the sphere of contrast of interaction, I think that, again, all of these should be considerations. Like when we're thinking about villains as DMs, and we're say at the start of a campaign, or maybe as the story's unfolding, and you go, "Ooh, this would make a great villain." You should be thinking like, "Hey, what are the motivations driving this villain, and how much conviction do they have to these motivations?" Because there are absolutely spaces, I think, where a villain, given the right interactions with the party, and it may even take, just like we said, it may take time. It might be that the first encounter you have with them is a skirmish, and things disperse. The next time you meet them, they might be completing some task that you were there to stop them.
Yeah.
And so like we're building, like, this guy's turning into a pretty big thorn in our sides. But you may come to a head where this person is coming to realize, like, everything they've been doing so far, they're starting to get in over their head. This is not what. There's all sorts of a great example of that in Mass Effect.
I played that game in a hot minute.
The original Mass Effect,
great game.
Saren,
you know me in names. Could you sleep with this one?
No. He's basically the quote unquote big bad of the first game. He is the N7 operator that you start your very first mission. You come.
Oh yes,
see him.
God, I haven't played that game.
He betrays. Wow. So, but when you get to the final encounter with him, you can talk him out of being a bad guy. And it's an option that where, I mean, he's being controlled by, oh, wow. Yeah, I'm losing all sorts of names too.
Dude, man, I feel I need to play this game again. Dang, because I remember 2 fairly well.
Yeah, and I cannot for the life of me, the ultimate big bads, the big machines who are coming to destroy everything.
Yeah.
But
I
that's
forget their names.
ultimately who's controlling Saren in the beginning, and you can shake him from that. So it's a great example of he is your eyes on that prize the entire game, and to get to the end and realize that this kind of fits into that space of let's say a character who is potentially not there. This is a whole other space for a villain, but a villain who is not acting of their own accord.
Which is, yeah, you're right. That's a totally different villain.
And can you hold someone who has come to their senses
Right.
accountable for all of the actions they've taken up to that point?
Yeah.
And so there's so many cool things you can do with villains, and I think important for us DMs is to be thinking about how can we introduce a villain into our game space that is going to provide some contrast to the other villains that are acting in the world.
That's the thing, yeah, because we're saying villains, and I fear that people are just hearing BBEG.
No, I'm thinking. I mean, this could be
villains.
could be
Local bandit at a town.
exactly
Yeah.
perfect. That's I mean, we're talking, and the thing is a local bandit for a early level adventure hook. That is kind of the BBEG of your early.
Yep.
Early hook, and again, maybe it's a deal where you come to find that this isn't the local, this isn't the murderer everyone said he was.
Right.
Maybe there have been a string of murders, but when you come to realize, like, no, this is more of a Robin Hood. Like he's he's a thorn in a bunch of noble sides who likely hired you to go deal with this,
Right, but
and were happy to let you believe that he was also responsible. So that's a good. Context is another major element.
Yeah, good point.
And I think playing with the amount of context the party has to operate on really allows you to shape, whether it be reality or not, how the party feels about that villain they're in pursuit of.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, we often talk about how exploration is the least used pillar. This is a great time to where you can start to use exploration to fuel everything else.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the examples we gave with regard to, I mean, certainly, like I said, combat pillar, you can have skirmishes with this villain. A trope that I love, in fact, I threw it out. Someone was asking for suggestions for like what should an early level adventure hook have?
Rats, dude.
Well,
Cellar.
Rats, obviously,
And
a wheel of cheese that you must return to Farmer Pettyjohn.
Thank you.
I mean,
it has to be a dairy product. I don't care if it's milk or cheese. It's got to be
milk
a dairy
or
product.
cheese. It's minimum dairy products. Cottage cheese.
Prove us wrong, by the way.
No, but here's what I threw out to them was something that I think would be awesome for an early adventure hook is a meeting with a major villain, it could even be the BBEG as an ally.
That's perfect.
Fighting alongside them for a number of levels, only to see them diverge. And what I love about that is, again, now this was, I believe it was an actual play podcast. So this is me responding knowing there's an audience. But the thing is how awesome is it for an audience to be able to kind of fall in love with this NPC that is with them, only to kind of walk with them down that darker and darker path as they slowly become. And the beauty is that is such a grounded villain. There's so many people in life who knew someone back in high school, knew someone, and watched someone that they knew, maybe even cared about at some point, begin going down a path that, and it's such a relatable thing to see someone you care about, someone you know, go a different direction and in some cases be powerless to put them back on a better track. And I think that makes for a really compelling.
Well, that's a really rich relationship you just built.
Well, absolutely. You maybe love this character out of the gate, only to,
Yeah, not to always draw back to Critical Role. Wasn't Gilmore the MP? I shouldn't say too much because I know Vox Machina is going on.
Maybe
yeah.
maybe pull the spoilers.
Never mind. Not gonna say anything. But
but likely Critical Role's done some decent work on this
Yeah,
subject.
Matt Mercer maybe knows a thing or two. But I was just thinking, I don't know, something else about a villain is, I don't know how many like truly evil people you've talked to in your life, and I hope it hasn't been too many. But people who I've talked to who are like messed up,
Yeah.
they justify everything. They in their minds are not evil.
Right.
I think that can make for a very complex villain.
Absolutely. And I would actually say that in the fantastical world of D&D, there are entities that I think fully realize they're evil and revel in the fact that they're evil.
Mhm.
But in real life, I don't think there are many individuals. I mean, you look at the atrocities that have occurred throughout the 20th century,
Yeah.
and all of those people considered themselves completely justified
Yeah,
in what they were doing.
Extremely disturbing what human beings can convince themselves of. And you're right. This is D&D. It's a fantasy world. So I mean, maybe you don't want to go that route, but that's always an interesting thing to do.
Well, no, and I completely second the notion because this kind of ties into a different topic of grounding, ensuring that your campaign worlds are grounded.
Ooh,
but
that's a great topic.
Yes, that's on the roster for sure.
That's a good topic.
But to just ping on that for 1 second is, it doesn't matter how fantastical the world is that you're in. The stories that you're telling are being consumed by human beings around that table. And if you're telling stories that don't relate at all to anything we understand in the real world, it's going to get very difficult to start making those connections. So, and villains are arguably one of the places where this is absolutely not an exception.
Right.
Because in order for us to build a relationship and hate, want to bring to justice, want to kill, whatever that is, we need to understand this individual. I mean, if it's a 20-brained operating in the 6th dimension and it just knows so much more than you can't possibly comprehend my motivations, well, then it's a deal where it's like, okay, I guess we're gonna kill you or do our best to.
Well, if you have that, because I'm on, I can think of Iliathid, is how you say it, and Iliathid, the mother bread. But maybe which is actually a great time, because I want to talk to. So we can't, on maybe a cosmic scale, we can't understand all the motivations of extremely intelligent beings, but maybe the lackeys underneath it can be interesting. So
okay,
you have your villains and you have your lackeys, and I think your lackeys need to also be just as interesting as your villains.
Absolutely, I think. And I think the introduction of lackeys, period, is another great way that we can build kind of vicarious rapport. You can come to hate that person more and more. Again, let's just harken to that bandit, this low-level bandit lord we're talking about. Well, if you've encountered a series of bandits who have just been outright nasty, I mean, we're not talking about just like, oh, these guys have chosen a life I would never choose. We're talking about, like, they're vile, foul-mouthed. They're obviously that reflects on their leadership. So it's another way in which you don't have to go like, hey, here's that guy you saw before, but he got away again.
Right.
And hey, here he is again. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity to kind of, through the lackeys, express
absolutely,
character about the leader. In some cases, you haven't even met the leader without seeing some of the lackeys first.
Right. So yeah, your lackeys might be an introduction to the philosophy of what the leader does, but also watching the leader how they treat the lackeys.
Oh, absolutely.
It can also be a very big indicator.
Jumping back to Shivik, aka Buttercup, when the crystal and the pit lord.
I had no idea who it was until you said Buttercup.
No, well, there you go. When that whole crystal aspect of a pit fiend was taking place, there was one point where Shivik just grabbed one of his people and threw them onto the crystal.
Because he's a dick. He deserves to die.
And it gives you a sense of he has a different value that he places on the life of the people around him. Whereas, in stark contrast to most adventuring parties,
Kel, he jumped in the mouth of the
that's
thing
true.
to save us.
Kel's a pretty selfless dude.
Yeah, paladin life, buddy. That's what I said.
So, and another thing that I think lackeys really helps to enhance is, and this you don't need lackeys to do this, but certainly as the campaign is continuing on, the party needs to understand that this villain, this person that they hate, is just as proactive as they are.
Okay.
That their power is growing, whether that be through more
No,
and more lackeys.
no. They stay stagnant. That's
stay,
what they do.
They stay CR9 no matter what level I become.
Because I was almost as powerful as Buttercup last time, and he has to stay there.
Well, but this is a great example of the introduction of lackeys. Is, let's say the first time you meet someone, maybe they're the leader of a small gang, a dozen guys.
Right.
The next time you meet them, they've taken over a thieves guild, and now they've got 30, 40 members at their disposal, not to mention kind of the infrastructure of having politicians in their pockets. By the end of the campaign, they run an entire metropolis, and now you're trying to bring down the leader of the largest thieves guild in all the Sword Coast.
Right.
That's a very different, but it's a good example of scaling power, whereas the individual themselves may not have scaled in power, but they're certainly their lackeys, their enterprise, and conversely, absolutely, I think you can have a character. I mean, in so many cases, it's like I'm the leader of some crazy cult, and the way I'm going to ascend to power is by opening the gateway for my demon lord, who is going to bestow the and so there's this. But the party also, I think, needs to have a sense of, one, the fact that that's a very real possibility. Again, when we're talking about intelligence, and I don't think that all villains have to be intelligent, but I think that most villains inherently will be, because it's difficult to build rapport. If we're talking about a hellhound that is just a menace, okay, fine, but you haven't really built
that's just an
rapport
enemy.
with it.
Yeah, so there's a difference between enemies and villains.
And now I think that, again, you could have some orc chieftain who isn't necessarily intelligent, but just has such raw power and savage brutality at their disposal. But in a lot of cases, I think when we're talking about running compelling villains, specifically BBEGs, inherently those tend to land in a scope where intelligence is one of the factors that has made them the BBEG.
Yeah.
That could be a god, and omnipotence is something pretty similar to intelligence, I would say.
Yeah.
But and again, that is a far from a rule.
It's far from a rule, because it was like, what about Tarask? Just throwing that out there. But that's not a BBEG.
Well, exactly. The BBEG, I think
he's the guy who summoned the Tarask.
Right. The expectation is the BBEG is a villain.
Yeah.
And the villain will have command of very powerful enemies, but the villain needs to have a personality that the party can loathe.
Yeah.
Or again, feel whatever it is they need to feel about this person. But so I do think you are really doing yourself a favor as a DM by writing your BBEGs or at least your premier villains with a modicum of intelligence, because that allows you to start doing things with those that can catch your party off guard, that can put your party in a place where they're going, okay, as a unit, we might be stronger than this guy, but I'm not sure we're smarter than this guy.
Right.
And that's a very
cool thing.
That's a very different place to be as you're scaling power. And that's another way that you can kind of scale. Intellectual power is another means by which
Absolutely. In fact, it's almost scarier.
Yeah, I think to some extent,
like the Joker, he wasn't super strong in any way, shape, or form. He didn't have any superpowers, but just the mind games he could play is
best Joker.
Heath Ledger.
Okay, no, just I needed to make sure we could keep doing this podcast.
No, get me wrong. I haven't seen Joaquin Phoenix. I haven't seen him in...
I have not seen it either, man. I'm actually pretty eager to.
So I heard he did a great job in it. But
I was just worried you were going to say Jared Leto, and then I was going to be done.
I don't think anyone...
I was worried.
Jack Nicholson is an entertaining Joker, and I enjoy him very much. But
don't even get me started on Jack Nicholson.
Dude, I love when he pulls out the revolver with the ridiculous...
Yeah, I'll give you that.
I love that scene. Anyway,
but yeah. No, I mean, we've said a bunch about villains. Villains, I could do 3 episodes on. I mean, villains are so cool, and they're such an integral part of running a compelling.
You have to have them. You have to have them. No, I totally agree. But if you could give just again any strong points you want to give.
Well, I would say the big ones are know your villain's motivations and know how to play with those motivations. That's not to say tweak them around and move them, but know those motivations relative to your party. Because if you go, this is a great villain, and then your party comes to find what their motivations are, and they go like, okay, we can get on board with that. Then you didn't have a great sense of your party's motivations.
Right,
So,
right. Which could also be interesting too, but
no, absolutely. I think, but at that point, you're no longer writing a villain. You're writing a very interesting ally potentially.
Ooh. Anyway, we can't. We gotta wrap it up. Okay.
But so first and foremost, motivation. Motivation is king. I mean, if you don't understand the motivation of your villains, you're gonna have a hell of a time convincing your party that they're worth dealing with.
Yeah.
You're also going to have a hell of a time maintaining conviction in those motivations. I really do think, and that's not to say that you can't have a great villain whose mind can be changed. That's a very rewarding moment for a party. But a hallmark of a villain is them not wishy-washing every time the party becomes a little bit of a nuisance. Oh, maybe we should do it this way. Maybe we should. Oh no, we should. Party be damned, they're going to get it done because they have conviction in what they're doing. Lastly, and most importantly, I think, is as with any great story, as with any great relationship in life, at the table between your party members, between your NPCs in your party, between your villains and your party, it's going to take time. Give it the time that it's due, and it will pay dividends when you allow that villain, again, especially if you're unfolding those motivations. An intelligent villain isn't going to wear their motivations on their sleeve.
Yeah.
They might be fully capable of aiding the party for a period of time, so long as it serves their motivations.
Right.
Only for the party to come to realize, holy shit, like, that's John Bob over there, and
Fuck John Bob.
John Bob is he's a master. He's a master of his craft.
I tell you, John Bob. Once you think you know where he's going to go the opposite way every time.
But no, time. And players, keep this in mind. There might be bittersweet moments where you win the fight, but the guy you really wanted to see at the end of your sword, at the end of your spear, ignited in flames, manages to slip through your fingers. Harness that. Put that motherfucker's face in your mind and know 3 levels from now, a level from now, 5 levels from now, whatever it is,
level 20, whatever it is.
But just know that if your DM is thinking about their villains and really wanting to give you something meaningful, you'll see them again. You'll have your shot. And that is a hallmark, I think, of your DM recognizing that it's gonna take time for you to enjoy the payoff of triumphing over that villain.
Yeah, I love it, and I'm glad. I thought you were going to go where I was going to go. So, as a player talking to DMs, you said you need time, and you need time to build a relationship. So that's my big thing. To DMs, let the players build a relationship with the villain. Now, that doesn't, I'm not saying it can be a negative relationship, but they need to have some connection, emotional connection with that thing. Because that makes everything just mean more, just everything. And when you finally bring down that villain, you are elated because you had that relation. They were not, and not just one dimensional, like, oh, he just murders babies. Well, why does he murder babies?
Yeah, the why, and we actually didn't touch on the why, but that's a great tag in the general.
And I'm not saying there's any reason to murder babies.
Are you saying that you could be aligned with a baby murderer depending on the motivation?
No, I'm sorry.
No. But I think knowing the why, because it's just a weird. It's like, why would you do this? Again, is it because the command of his demon overlord it drives them to? Is it because he needs baby organs to put together?
Right.
You know, what I mean,
baby organs. He needs that suit.
He's making a baby suit.
Yep,
whatever it is. But the why, I really do think is an important factor. real quick,
One more,
and I
but
don't want to interrupt your
I got it in
your
my head. You're good.
overview. It's actually posing something to you.
Mm.
You just said speaking to DMs.
Mhm.
Can you speak to other players for me?
That's exactly where I was about to go.
Perfect. You're the man.
So, talking to other players, my biggest advice, and I don't want to create any animosity between DMs and PCs, even though, let's be honest with each other, DMs are the enemy and should be never trusted. But
every one of you motherfuckers is going to die next session.
oh, bring it on. But no, I don't want to say hold your DM to task, but don't be afraid to, like, hey, try to understand your villains. If nothing else, that's going to bring them more to light. It might even help you in your story. Why is, again, I don't want to stick to child murder. I don't like that. But
Or we stick with Buttercup.
Buttercup.
Ramar.
All right.
Yeah.
So Buttercup. Why is Buttercup so fascinated on Aster?
That's literally the mission statement of Aster's backstory.
Yeah. What is so important? And then what that does is, as you try to be like, okay, DM, I want to know why Buttercup is so after Aster. It's forcing the DM. No, I want to say force. It's encouraging the DM to flush out that enemy just a little bit more. And it's showing that you're engaged. It only encourages him, which means overall, everyone's going to have a better experience.
Yep. I think again, there's a whole rabbit hole to go down on what you just said. I love it. I'm going to abstain because, there's
We only so many hours in a day, my friends.
Yeah, there's so much awesome stuff to be said about villains. I think that pretty much covers the DM side.
For Villain 101, and that might be the let's call it there.
I think I'd love to do like an anatomy of a villain and really actually talk.
This is please in the comments, because please put in the comments anything you want us to delve more into, or questions or ideas, anything we can
we'd love to hear
that stuff up.
What kind of stuff you guys want to. What do you want to hear about? What do you want to talk? What do you want us to talk about? And more importantly, what do you want to talk about with us? Drop it in the comments. I would love to know who's your favorite villain? I answered the same question for Nerd Night News. They posted a deal out, and my answer was Silco from Arcane, because it's been that impactful. I highly encourage you, find wherever you find the time, grab an episode or two here.
What platform is it on?
Netflix.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and I was blown away. I was blown away by how good it was.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
Check it out. That goes for everyone at home too. I think probably a lot of people have checked it. I know it's done very, very well, but I'd love to hear in the comments. Pick your medium. Who's the best villain as far as you're concerned, and why? Because and I'd really like to see how that graphs on the conversation we've had today. Does it play off the principles that we've talked about here? Is there something we've missed? Maybe your why will illuminate.
I would love to do a villains 201 subject for sure.
I'd love to, and if we hear enough about it in the comments, we will definitely get after that.
Absolutely.
Beyond that, I think we're pretty much squared up here, sir. I think who's taking us out? We're on the subject of villains. So
right. Do you have anything?
Here's what I think.
Okay.
As a DM, I get to run villains an awful lot.
I never get to run villains.
As a PC, you don't ever have the chance.
Let's say unless I want to do an evil villain, evil hero, but that's something we don't do.
But as of yet, that's
we do
not
long.
the case.
Anyway,
here is my thing to you: is the world is theirs.
Is it though?
But from the lips of a monologuing villain during the last stand,
anything beyond villain, or is that what you're giving me?
You can be whatever kind of villain you want to be, sir.
This is the day. Those pompous pricks, those mortals. Today, we'll make them pay for ever thinking the living should conquer this world. For today, the world is mine.